Welcome to the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. This is a podcast for male survivors of sexual abuse and assault, whether as a child or as an adult. Know that you are not alone and the abuse was not your fault. My name is Mike Chapman. I'm a certified recovery life coach and also a survivor. Let's find hope and healing together. And welcome to the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. I'm Mike Chapman, your host. And with me today is Kyle Drossel, and I will give you his intro in a moment. And we are live like we are most weeks. If you would like to join us on future live sessions, you can find out more on how to do so on my website, polarlifeconsulting.com/live. And we have an audience here. If you would like to share anything with us in chat, you can put your questions or whatever in the chat room, and we will honor anonymity. We will only say your name if you manually type it in with your question or comment. And with that, let me introduce Kyle Drossel. He is a 31-year-old man who has been through a lot. He recently found his way back to God, and that has helped him feel more at peace. He likes to spend his free time hiking and running, which helps him clear his head. But Kyle still struggles with relationships because of something that happened to him when he was 13. The assistant fire chief of the Sheboygan Falls, Wisconsin, someone he trusted, sexually assaulted him. This experience led Kyle down a bad path of using drugs and alcohol, but he's happy to say that he's sober now and he wants to help others who have gone through similar things. So he started a group called Breaking the Silence. Currently on Facebook, a link will be in the show notes. Kyle's goal is to help men feel comfortable talking about their problems and getting help. He hopes that by sharing his story, he can inspire others to do the same and create a community where men can support each other. Kyle also wants to spread awareness about the dangers of turning to drugs and alcohol as a way to cope with trauma, and he hopes that his story can help prevent others from going down the same path he did. And we'll definitely talk more about all of that. And a lot of those same things are themes of this podcast, including the power of story. So to move forward, we're going to start like we do most episodes and start with 4 questions. Now it's time for 4 questions, that part of the podcast when we get to know our guest a bit better by asking a few questions. Let's go. So, Kyle, what is your favorite food memory?
So my favorite food memory would be just playing outside as a kid in the cold weather, and then after playing, coming in the house and my dad would have like chili cooking or meatball stroganoff cooking, and you just get blasted with all those good smells.
Oh, right, I'm sure. Yes, absolutely. Have you copied any of those recipes and made them on your own yet?
I'm trying. I mean, he passed away 4 years ago, so
Yeah.
he wasn't the type of guy to write down his recipes.
It's just throw stuff in and see what works. Yeah.
Yeah. So the meatball stroganoff, I'm still trying to perfect.
Understand. Yes. My wife's like that in the kitchen a lot. She just throws stuff in a pan, never a recipe, and lots of hits, occasional misses, but I love her and I love the effort. Yeah. We'll leave it at that. So, what is your favorite Christmas or holiday memory?
My favorite holiday memory was going to my grandparents' house and staying the night on their farm. It was, as a kid, I just loved to wake up early with my grandpa and go out and collect eggs and just walk around the barn and just be outside, you know.
Nice, nice. So you just went there on holidays, or it was rarer that you were there on the farm?
It was mostly just holidays that we'd go and visit because they're about an hour and 45 minutes away.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, yeah, we didn't get to see them as much, so it was definitely a treat when we did get to go there.
I'm sure. That sounds nice. So, what
Hmm.
is your favorite church or house of worship memory?
Honestly, my favorite church memory just came to me a few weeks ago. It was just getting back into church.
Hmm.
Because after the sexual assault happened, I stopped believing in God. And
Right,
a few weeks ago, I went back to church, and I could just feel a lot of different emotions of just being there. It was
right,
what the pastor was talking about. It was just soaking up everything.
right. Absolutely. I've had those times as well. But yeah, especially it sounds like you've had this renaissance in your faith. So, re experiencing that, I'm sure that's very impactful. So, what is your favorite scripture or any inspirational quote that has helped you on your spiritual journey? And what about it speaks to you?
Yeah, so my favorite quote is greatest glory in living lie not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. That was a quote from Nelson Mandela.
Yes,
It resonates with me big time. I mean, and it will as I go on with my life as well, because we're all gonna fall. I'm
right,
I'm on the healing path, but I will fall once again. I mean, it could
right,
be in a different aspect, but I fell a lot of times in my life, and drinking was one of my biggest falls, and it was something that kept on happening. And
right,
from every situation of drinking, it got a little bit better. I was able to take a little bit from going into rehab the first time and the second time and the third time. And each time I was able to add something to my life.
mm,
It wasn't
right,
completely starting at ground zero.
right. And recovery is rarely an upward climb that's straight as an arrow. It's all kinds of dips. It's like I don't know if you've seen those little family circus cartoons where the little boy is
Hmm.
like, his mom says, okay, go from A to B. And instead of A to B, he's walking around the playground, the front yard, the backyard. And you see all these dashed lines of where he goes before he finally gets to his destination. And recovery is a lot like that. So you
Yeah.
have ups and downs, and you go a few steps backwards, some steps forward, all kinds
Hmm.
of issues before you. But continual progress overall, though it's rarely a straight line. Yeah, recovery's messy.
Oh, it's very messy. And you
Yeah,
don't you don't really look at it like that while you're in the peak of it,
right,
you know.
right.
Going back to rehab the third time, I'm thinking,
Mm, yeah,
shoot, I'm in here again.
yeah. And that's very normal. Yeah, because it's not a straight line. And relapse is part of the healing process. And then you
Mhm.
learn, okay, what can I do better next time? What do I need to avoid? What things do I need
Mhm.
to have in place? And the thing I love about God, He's Heavenly Father. So, do you have children yet?
I do not.
You don't. Okay. When you're a father and you have a baby and they're learning to walk and they might stand up, then they fall down. You don't say, "Oh, you stupid idiot, you fell down." You go, "Oh my gosh, they stood up. That's so wonderful." And then next time they'll take one step and then they'll fall again. It's like, "Oh, you stupid idiot." No, it's not that. It's like, "I took one step. That's wonderful. Oh my gosh."
Mhm.
And you celebrate the progress, not the failure. That's what an earthly father does. How much more does our Father in heaven do that? It's like, "Oh my gosh, you made so much progress. You fell again. I understand, but I'm so proud of you. Look how far you've come. Oh my gosh, now we're going to get up, we're going to do it again, and it's okay." And he sees the growth, he sees the progress, he sees the successes, and that's his focus, not the failure, because he's a loving father. And that was just like, oh, someone told me that. And it's like such a clear picture of his love that since my early father was my main abuser, that totally messed me up as far as getting that concept of Father God. So that's a huge growth area for me to really understand that concept that, yeah, He is there and He wants us to succeed and He celebrates our successes. Even when we fail, He celebrates the success.
Mhm.
So, with that, would love to hear more about your story. And it sounds like there's a lot there. And
Yeah.
like most stories, it doesn't always happen timeline order, and mine bounces around. Most of my guests, their story bounces around the timeline. Feel free, go wherever you want. I would like to see how much of the abuse story, however much you want to share, however deep you want to go. This is a safe place, though. Hey, it's podcast, so you got an
Right.
audience. And then from there, I would love to know more about your healing journey, what things have worked, what things haven't worked. And then from there, what you're doing now, including this wonderful Facebook group ministry that you've come up with. And I've been so thrilled to be a part of and see it grow over the last several months. So you're doing great with that, in my personal
Thank you.
opinion. So let's hear more about Kyle.
Yeah, so I'll just start off with the story about the abuse. The guy was my neighbor. He was a friend that I looked up to. You know, I was a 13-year-old boy. He was the assistant chief of the fire department. Yeah, so as a young boy, I just looked up to him and I always wanted to hang around him. And it wasn't until my adult years that I realized what he was actually doing. It
Mm,
was slowly grooming me. And
right,
of course, at the
exactly.
time, I didn't know what grooming was, but he would do mannerisms that teenage boys would do, like the sack tap. You know, everybody in grade school,
Yeah,
they're sack tapping you, and it's
which means
funny.
touching the
And
testicles, right? Well,
yeah,
but over the clothing. Yeah,
yeah,
that yeah,
yeah.
that was
So
not a
he,
thing for me growing up, but yeah, I've heard of
yeah,
that.
it
Yes.
was, yeah. So it was a thing for me, and so he would do that. And
Hmm.
as an adult, that is just extremely inappropriate, you
Right.
know. But it was small things like that that would he would wrestle with me in the neighbor's yard and touch me inappropriately, but at the time I thought it was just wrestling, you know. So there was a lot
Right.
of things that led up to it. I see that now as an adult, and it was hard to forgive myself for seeing those things as an adult, because why didn't I tell my parents this happened? Why didn't I do this? Why did I keep going over to his house to hang out with him, you know?
So
So, and
how did
then,
that start with him? Was he like involved with the high school or volunteering, or how did he even get into your life? If you don't mind me asking.
yeah, he lived right next door to me.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains it. Okay, so he was your neighbor.
Yeah, yeah. So he lived right across the street.
Okay. And did he like
Yes.
instigate? He like invited you over more and started developing a friendship ish thing?
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that whole grooming. Then how long between when you can sense that grooming started to happen to the point where he actually made his move and did something sexual beyond the sack tap?
I think it was 2 years.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Long con. Yeah. That's common for groomers. Yeah.
Yeah, and I started babysitting for him. So
Right.
I was babysitting his kids and we were connecting that way too. And then the assault happened. So I was
Mm,
watching his daughter while he was having like this big party that he always had for the end of the
right.
summer. And his mother-in-law, where I was babysitting, lived like a block over. So he came by around 10 o'clock at night with his mother-in-law, and his mother-in-law relieved me of babysitting. And then he was like, "Oh, do you want to walk home with me?" So I started walking home with him, and then he started talking about puberty and asking me questions about if I started shaving yet, and giving me tips on how to shave. And then he told me
Right.
to touch his balls to see how smooth they were. And
Mm.
then he asked if he could put his hands in my pants, and I kind of shrugged my shoulder, and then he did it anyways.
Put your hand in there.
He put his hand in my pants and he felt
Oh,
my
yeah. Yeah.
testicles. Yeah.
Yeah.
And from that minute, I felt extremely uncomfortable. But then he was able to change the subject, and
Hmm.
we were still walking. And there's an alley that connects from that street, his mother in law's street, back
Hmm.
to my street. So we
Right.
ended up going through the alley. He pulled my arm, stopped me, and then he pulled my pants down and he started sucking on my dick.
Wow. Wow.
And it was probably 5 seconds. I kind of just froze like a deer in headlights
Right.
and pulled up my pants. And of course, my phone at the time was dead. So I quick pretended I was on the phone with my sister and she was wondering where I was at. And I was
Mm-hmm.
able to walk really fast, and he ended up following me the rest of the way home, but he was like, "Hey, I thought you were gay because I would see you planting flowers all the time." So he was trying to justify what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went on to say, like, hey, you don't have to tell anyone about this. It was a big misunderstanding, and I hope we're good. But if you need to talk about it with me.
Mm. Yeah.
And then from that point on, I went into my house. I was crying in my bedroom. I wasn't really sure what was happening. And then I ended up knocking on my sister's door and crying and just said, hey, the neighbor's being creepy again. And can I sleep on your floor? So I
Mm.
slept on her floor, but I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep for the
Right.
first few nights.
So you had reported to your sister his creepy behavior, or she's noticed some creepy behavior in the past?
She has, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And a lot of people, now that I know what I know now, a lot of people, you bring up this guy's name and they're like, oh,
Yeah.
that's creepy John.
Yeah. So the people got an icky feeling with him, even though nothing necessarily happened, but he gave off that icky vibe
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Now, how was your relationship with your father at that time? Were you close? Was he distant?
No, we are very close. My dad was my
Okay.
best friend.
Okay.
But yeah, I was never able to tell anybody in my family, though. I touched base with my sister saying that he was being creepy again, but I left it at that.
Right, right. Interesting. So, what happened after that? The abuse happened. He's still your neighbor. Any other interaction after that? Did he try anything again, or did he realize, okay, you were done?
He tried, but I never got close enough for that to happen again. He harassed me from the minute the assault happened to just last year.
Wow, wow.
You know, it would be small things. It was me mowing my lawn out in my yard and him rolling his window down saying, hey, you're looking good, Kyle. You know, it was just little jabs like that over the years.
Yeah, ouch, ouch. Wow, wow. So, when were you able to first disclose that this happened? How old were you before you told anyone?
Yeah, before I told anybody, I was 28.
Okay, so this would be 15 years after the abuse happened. And
Correct.
FYI, they do research for men. Average age of disclosure is 20 to 25 years after the abuse ends. So you were on the early side. Some it would be even much longer before disclosing to that first person.
Yeah. So the first person I told was my ex-girlfriend at the time. I just felt comfortable because she's been through some stuff, so we kind of trauma bonded.
So now she's your ex at the time she was your girlfriend, or at the time she was also your ex?
No, she was my girlfriend at the time.
Okay, and how did that go?
I mean, it was nice having someone that could somewhat relate with me, but it
Right.
wasn't like you think when you tell someone a secret that big, it's going to be a complete relief off your chest. And honestly, by that point, it was making things worse for me.
How so?
I would say just the more of the memories came up.
Mm.
Before I told anyone, it was my secret. And then I said it out loud for the first time in 15 years.
Right. Yeah, you had locked it away in a box and put it in its little hiding place, and
Yeah.
now it's out, and now it's forcing you to deal with all that stuff, which is
Yeah.
actually
And
healthier than keeping it in a box for sure.
Right, right. But yeah, it was dealing with it,
Right.
and it was dealing with all the PTSD that comes with it, and
Absolutely.
gradually as I got older, the worse my PTSD got.
Yeah. Because, yeah, it's no longer in that little box and you're opening it up and all those feelings, all those things are coming out in this adult
Yeah.
sexualized body,
Hmm.
dealing with all that. And then intermixed with all your normal hormones and everything else going on in there, navigating relationships. Yeah, all kinds of stuff pops up.
Yeah.
Um,
And it was navigating through big life events. The past 4 years have been extremely hard. It was losing my father, not being able to deal with that, and then getting into a relationship that was very unhealthy.
with this ex girlfriend,
Yeah, so all of these things kept piling up, and I started drinking more and more, but it
right?
all stemmed back to the sexual abuse.
Right. So, were you able to tell eventually your father or any other family members about what happened?
So I was able to tell my other family members, but my father passed before I was able to tell him, which I wish I would have.
Yeah, we've talked about disclosure on this podcast before, and there's so many things preventing us from telling because wanting to protect them. Because if you told him, okay, is he going to get pissed? Is he going to go after the guy? And then if he goes after the guy and hurts the guy, is he going to get arrested? I don't know if those thoughts entered your head. That with my mother, that's what came through my head. It's either going to kill her, she'll have a heart attack, all this horror stories, worst case scenarios, or she's going to get so pissed and then go after my father, her ex husband, with a gun, shoot him, get arrested. It's this whole worst case scenario thing that's going on in my mind. Whether if I told her this is the worst that could possibly happen. And yeah, I'm really good at that game. And I'll find the absolute worst thing to
Hmm.
convince me to not tell. And like most disclosure, when you do disclose, oftentimes it's not the whole story. It's like, okay, we'll give a little snippet, see how they handle just a little tiny morsel. And if they don't handle it well at all, it's like, okay, that's it. I got this whole big, huge pile of stuff I wanted to share with you. You just got a little taste. You handle it horribly. Okay, well, I'm not sharing this with you.
Yeah, well, and you bring up a really good point because I did test the waters before fully coming out with it.
With your girlfriend.
Yeah, and with friends and
Right.
family, it would be giving them a little bit more of the creepy John story, but then seeing their reaction and then going back in my turtle shell.
Right. Exactly. And then seeing their reaction, and different people respond different ways. And some are very
Yeah.
compassionate. And then there's some horrible reactions where they victim blame and all that. Yeah, I was able to tell my sister, and she instantly believed me. So sorry that happened. And about the best possible response you could get,
Hmm.
though it took a long time for me to tell her. It was after our mom died. And then I told her. And kind of a fit of anger, we were arguing about something else. And then I just kind of spilled it out. Didn't mean to. It slipped out. And then it's, oh, crap. Okay. And then we talked about it. Now, did you disclose with your sister as well?
Yeah, but that didn't happen up until last year.
Wow. And how did that go? Because she remembered him.
Yeah, yeah, well, because he still, to this day, he still lives across
Right.
the street from my mom's house.
Mm-hmm.
So she believed me. She was supportive. All my sisters were. But then
Right.
my mom, not so much. She was kind of the person that said, "Why didn't you say anything at the time?" So that was frustrating for me. That was extremely frustrating.
Right. Though, who would have believed you? You were a 13-year-old kid and he had all the power. So, yeah. So, has anything come out against him? Other victims come forward or anything? How public is this story locally? And now you're kind of out on Facebook talking about this stuff. How known is it that he does this stuff?
It's known now. So, my third trip to rehab, I was sitting in my room and I was thinking, okay, enough is enough. I've got to deal with this issue. So I
Hmm.
was able to connect with a therapist. She was able to connect me to a lady at Safe Harbor. That's one of the local crisis centers for sexual assault victims. And we were able to talk. And then finally, I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to report this guy. And so they had the cops come to rehab. And man, was I a nervous wreck that morning.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I, like, in my head, it was like what you said. It was the worst case scenario. The cops were going to say, you were a liar. This never happened.
right.
All this stuff that I made up.
Or what were you wearing? What'd you do to seduce him?
Yeah.
Which they do a lot. So
Yeah.
how did it go?
It went really well, actually.
Really? Wow.
The guy was amazing. He treated me like a person that I didn't think I was going to get treated like.
Wow.
And he was able to walk me through it, and he made it very comfortable for me to share my story because I thought I was going to get all jumbled up and, with all these hard questions, but no, he
Right.
was extremely compassionate. So that happened.
So he takes your statement. Now, what's happening with this guy? Are they going to press charges? Was it statute of limitations? How did they proceed with the information?
Yeah, so he said that they would have to investigate a little bit. But what I
Right.
didn't know when I was in rehab, I'm not gonna name who this person is, but this person that was close to me ended up texting him off a fake number, pretending like they were a teenage boy. And he bit onto that. And right away, he was talking sexual with what he thought was a teenage boy.
Wow. So they catfished him on purpose to try to catch him, so to
Yeah,
speak? Okay.
yeah, yeah. And he ended up sending pictures of his face, and then instantly he sent a dick picture
Wow.
right away. And it's to what he thought was a teenager. So the cops were able to make that arrest off of that.
Wow. So,
Mhm.
but it sounds like he's out. So that
So
arrest didn't stick, or they're waiting for charges, they're waiting for court.
no, so the charges did stick. He was able to make bond.
Right.
So they originally posted it for 150,000, and then his lawyer was able to get it down to 25,000. But
Right, which is 2,500.
no, so Wisconsin is one of those states that you have to post the full bail.
Really? Oh, wow. So he had
Yeah.
to come up with 25K. Wow.
Which
Okay.
I'm not really sure where he came up with that, but yeah. So
Right.
but to backtrack, when they arrested him, he ended up confessing everything. He confessed to me, he confessed to others, and then all of a sudden,
Wow.
weeks go by, and he lawyered up, and now he's pleading not guilty. So,
Though there was a confession. Hopefully they taped the damn thing. Um,
hopefully,
but he confessed to you and a whole bunch of other boys.
yeah, yeah,
Wow. Wow.
but like the kicker here is the other boys don't want to testify.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And which is, I was upset with that for a while. But you know what? It's their story. I'm not going to be mad at them because they don't want to come forward. If I was pressured into coming forward, I wouldn't have come forward. I had to
Right.
do it at my own time.
Right. Right. And like I said, average 25 years before you tell
Hmm.
anyone. And yeah, and there's so much grooming, and especially with males, because our bodies, even young boys, our bodies have physiological reactions to touch. So,
Right.
and the groomers will use that. It's like, hey, see, you have an erection. That means you like it. Okay, so
Yeah.
that means you want this. And so there's all those mixed messages that perpetrators will use as part of the grooming process to continue on and convince the victim that they're not a victim, that this is not abuse, that this is part of some kind of relationship-y kind of thing. When
Hmm.
power dynamics, age difference, so forth. Oh my Lord, it is abuse. But that's the tactics that they use. And so as a result, so many male victims don't come forward because they think they're complicit in it because of all those mixed messages, for sure.
Yeah, and I think his mistake with me was I wasn't gay. So his main target was gay teenagers.
Right.
You
Though,
know, 'cause
can a 13-year-old necessarily know what their sexual identity or preference is anyway? No,
no.
and you can be sensitive or whatever, and that's his own justification. Well,
Yeah.
you looked gay, so what does that even mean?
Right.
There's
Right.
sensitive males, there's not sensitive males, there's very athletic males who are gay and very athletic males who are straight.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but in his mind, it was how he could justify it. So you're gay, so you want me to molest you as an
Right.
adult? Is like, no. And gay sex is very different from pedophilia. And yeah, two different worlds.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he was trying to justify it. Well, I'm gay. That's why I like little boys. No, no, you're a pedophile. You're not gay. You're
Hmm.
not homosexual. You are a pedophile. And you like to do things with boys. And that's very different from an adult who chooses to have sexual relationships with an adult of their same gender. That's up to them.
Right.
But no, pedophilia is a whole different ballgame. And in his mind, I think that's how he could justify it. People will justify things in the weirdest ways, but yeah.
It is so weird because he was so comfortable in those text messages that it was
Right,
just mind blowing how comfortable he was.
right. Pedophiles learn, boys don't tell. So the more success they get, the more emboldened they become to go to the next boy and the next boy and the next boy. And
Hmm.
so to the point where, yeah, this friend texts him and is like, oh, wow, you're interested in me. You're only 12. Okay, well, here's a dick pic. You
Yeah.
know, that's how emboldened he was because nothing ever happened for all those
Right.
years and all those boys. And so at this point, yeah, he was ready. So, wow, so he's still out there. So everything's still pending.
Hmm.
Um, wow. Okay. All right. So moving forward, that's a lot. So, what have you done to get yourself healthy from all of this, the PTSD and all those things?
So it would have been my fourth time in rehab. So after I reported the sexual assault, I was not able to deal with all the feelings that I
Right.
was going through, and just living in a small town like Sheboygan
Right.
Falls was not a good place to be. So I
Right.
ended up relapsing, and I ended up going back to rehab, and I was extremely discouraged because there was a part of me that felt stronger, but then at the same time, I was just overconsumed. So yeah, it was that last trip to rehab that one of my instructors was like, "How many relapses do you have left?" And honestly, I said zero. I
Yeah.
don't have any. And and instead of feeling bad for myself when I got out of rehab the fourth time, I ended up doing more research and
Right.
starting the group Breaking the Silence and trying to figure out, because like before I started the group for Breaking the Silence, I did a lot of research on just if there was any in-person groups.
Right.
And as I would research every single day on different groups for men, I was just seeing nothing. And I was like, you
Right.
know what? If I'm going to heal, I need to be surrounded by people that have also been in situations like me. Because I tried groups that were mostly girls, and, it's not
Right.
the same.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not the same at all. So I I convinced myself to start the group, and the healing process has been so much easier. I mean, even though it's
Right.
online, I've been able to meet guys like you. I've been able to meet a bunch of people from all over, and
Right.
it's eye-opening because for the longest time you think you're in it by yourself.
Right. But the stats are 1 in 6. 1 in 6 males
One in
are
six,
sexually
yeah.
abused or assaulted by the age of 18 in the U.S. For
Hmm.
females, it's 1 in 4. Though they think because boys don't tell, it's a lot closer. It's probably closer to 1 in 4 because boys don't tell. And one thing that I've learned, I hear it all the time, recovery happens in community, that you heal in community with the support of other people.
Oh,
And
definitely.
sometimes you need to find your community because it's not always out there. And
Right.
like you did, and I've done the same thing, that, yeah, I've come up with my own group that is supportive. And that's why, yeah, a lot of them have come on the podcast, different people who have crossed my paths. But recovery definitely happens in community. So you've been to therapists as well outside of your rehabs?
Yeah, so I'm currently seeing a therapist bi-weekly, so that's
And
been going good. And
what kind of methods are they using? And is it a male therapist or a female therapist? And did you have a preference?
yeah, so I did have a preference. It was I wanted to have a female therapist. I just felt more comfortable.
Right. Yeah, my first one when I started looking into this more was female, and then she recommended a male therapist, and then I eventually went to them, and then he got me hooked up to my current therapist, which is also a male. But yeah, I get that. I definitely wanted a female at first because, yeah, you don't necessarily know who to trust, and yeah, get comfortable with the idea of a therapist first before then all of a sudden it's a male therapist and you have to deal with all this stuff with the guy. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's stuff with that. So I totally get that for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, so what kind of things is he working with you on? What type of therapies has he tried? Is it just a talk therapy, which cognitive behavioral therapy, that kind of thing, or is he doing other stuff?
Well, so she's just
Oh,
doing
she. That's right. It's a female.
yeah, she's just doing talk therapy right now,
Mm-hmm.
working on different programs that I can go in. IOP, intensive outpatient, where you go for the group for like alcoholism and like ways to cope with stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
she's been giving, well, she wasn't even the one that gave me this advice. It was when I was in rehab, the therapists were very adamant on coping mechanisms.
Right.
And so I continue to learn more about that stuff. It's the grounding techniques. It's when you're getting overwhelmed by thoughts, and for me, I can bury myself into this case. It's
Right.
refreshing that circuit court screen over and over again, and then it's me telling myself, okay, that's enough.
Mm.
You got to take a break today because it's consuming you today. So it's how
Right.
can I get back to the present? So it's long distance running for me. It's taking a hike out in nature and actually taking that hike, not just robotically walking through the woods. It's
Right.
taking in the sights, taking in the smells, the sounds, it's all of
Right.
that stuff.
Yeah, that's a lot of self care for
Yeah.
sure. Getting the exercise, but getting in tune with nature, that can be so healing. And all those things. Yeah, practicing some good grounding techniques and so forth. It's all very helpful. Excellent. So,
Mhm.
have you tried anything that didn't work other than substances? Obviously, didn't work, but anything else that didn't work in your therapy, in your recovery journey?
I would say the biggest thing, and it kind of ties into alcohol and drugs as well, but it was just being honest,
Hmm.
and I had great difficulties just being honest with myself. Is realizing what happened as a kid was traumatic, not
Right.
downplaying it. It was
Right.
realizing I had a drinking problem, I had a drug problem, and not finding excuses to be okay with the drinking, be okay with the self harm, you know?
Right. That's in 12 steps, that's step one, isn't it? Realizing you were powerless and
Yeah.
admitting to that is huge. It's a huge part of the healing process for sure. Realizing, yeah, this was out of my control. Um, and how I end each of the podcast episodes here, the abuse was not your fault.
Yeah. That was a big thing that I just realized as of recent, you know?
Yeah,
That was,
yeah.
and it took me having a therapist. She walked me through this exercise. The therapist played a child, and
Mm-hmm.
what happened to that child was what happened to me. So, what advice would I give to that child? Is what she
Mm,
told me to do.
yeah,
And I kind of broke down and I was like, it wasn't your fault. You were just a child, and it just clicked with me. And I
right,
felt it in my body and I felt it in my emotions. Man, why are we so hard on ourselves?
right. Absolutely. And it brings to mind those co victims of yours with that firefighter dude who
Hmm.
never came forward, probably because they still think it was partly their fault. And I love the analogy of how children think. Like if you play hide and seek with little children, they'll grab a blanket, cover up their head, and think, oh, you can't see me because I can't see you. That's how children's minds work, even all the way into, middle school, teenager. They think, oh, something bad happened. I must have done something bad to have caused it. So
Yeah.
much gets internalized and self blaming because that's how children think. Something bad happened. It must have been my fault, even though it
Hmm.
wasn't. And trying to convince not only the adult you, but that little boy inside of you, it was not your fault. You did nothing wrong. You were there. And if it wasn't you, it would have been someone else. You were there. And it's an evil, sinful world and filled with sinful people who do bad things. And that is not your fault.
Hmm.
Absolutely. We do have a comment from the audience. It says, hey, Kyle, I missed the first 10 minutes, but just wanted to say I related to your story, addiction and PTSD, and how it's not the same for females. Yes, very much different. And I didn't talk for 35 years. Thank you. So, yes, the audience member could relate. And he took 35 years before his first disclosure. So, bravo to you for coming out as early as you did. And I think for younger people, it's a little easier because now with the Me Too movement and so forth, it's becoming more known. Even look at the Menendez trials, and they're reopening that because people understand it more and it's more public. So people realize, and there's more support in public where even 10 years ago, so much less was known or accepted, realizing this really happens to boys and it happens a lot. People are really understanding that now, whereas 10, 20 years ago, they absolutely didn't. So
Hmm.
it was kind of this scarlet letter kind of thing, putting on yourself, coming out and disclosing. So let's see. Now, let's talk about what you're doing now. So you're still in Wisconsin. Sounds like you're still in Sheboygan Falls. Is that right?
I am not. I actually, after I got out of rehab this last time, I
Mm-hmm.
moved to Sheboygan with my sister where
Okay.
I wouldn't be alone all the time. I'm surrounded with my nephew and my brother-in-law and my sister, so that's making all the difference.
Right. And you're not in that same area where that guy's just like, hey, you're looking good. It's like, how triggering would that be? That's just so
Oh,
ick that he
yeah.
would continue to do that. So just getting yourself out. I had to do that even though I blocked out so much of my abuse. I knew I had to get away from my home state. I grew up in Oregon. Now I'm in North Carolina. There's a whole freaking country between us now. So I could get healthy. And that made a world of difference. And looking back, yeah, it's helped tremendously being that far away from the scene of the crime. And yeah, sounds like you're making some good, healthy choices with that. So
Yeah.
now you've got this Facebook group. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, so I just started this Facebook group about maybe a month or two ago. And,
Hasn't
you
really
know,
been that long. It seems it's been going for forever, and it's very,
I,
very active. So yeah, it's
yeah,
kind of
I
just
mean,
exploded.
I'm surprised at how active it has been because I've seen other groups where the conversation dies off very quickly, but
Right,
I'm also posting a lot. I'm
right,
posting as much as I can because in the beginning I got so discouraged with posts not getting views or people seeing it and not reacting to it or not starting a conversation. But I realized over time where if I just keep posting more and get the conversation going, even if it wasn't a story that related to me. There's this
right,
one gentleman that reached out to me and asked if I could touch light on arousement and
right,
sexual abuse. So
right,
I was able to do research on that because honestly, I knew very little.
right,
But I was able to do research and I was able to post it on my group, and sure, a bunch of people started commenting on it, and they were able to relate with that. So
right,
it's teaching me a lot of things. There's some things that some people have gone through that I have not gone through. So it's just understanding that sexual abuse, it affects everyone so differently.
right, right. And you had a one-time occurrence, whereas other people have had multiple occurrences over
Hmm.
time, several perpetrators, in my case, even as far as trafficking and all those severities. Though, even with your one time, how much, that's why it's not a contest, it's all bad, it's all destructive, and it can have, even one time, like in your story, horrific effects on the victim. So, yeah, and so many just get off. That's why the legal system is so messed up. So,
Hmm.
and people wonder, well, why don't you report it? Well, okay, you did. And yeah, the guy's still on the street. He posted bail and even go to court. And then, yeah, so much horror stories of victim blaming and so forth. You had a wonderful experience, but there's just so many horror stories out there. Why bother?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I did file a police report, but they took the information and yeah, there's like, okay, there's no evidence. It happened decades ago and they'll keep it on file. So if there's any other reports, then they can proceed. So, it is what it is. But yeah, that's why people don't necessarily report it to authorities because almost pointless, sad to say.
Yeah.
They have laws and so forth, and they're removing statute of limitation laws and whatnot, which
Hmm.
helps. But yeah, it's still not a great system because you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person did it. And that's a huge burden because there's not a lot of evidence unless they confess or there's some kind of videotape evidence, which apparently in your case they have because the guy catfished the guy into sending dick pics and whatnot. Yeah. It's like, okay, but that's the exception, not the rule. So many get away with it. So, but any final thoughts for my listener out there? What things would you want them to know?
I would say a big thing that I learned from posting on one of the male survivor groups that I'm a part of. So, right when I initially reported this man for sexually assaulting me, I made this big post on one of the groups I was a part of. And a guy told me, don't get justice and healing mixed up because
Right.
they're very two different things. And
Yes.
that was a huge eye opener, because he was 100% right.
Right.
And before reporting and before doing all that, you got to ask yourself, what are you doing that for? For me, what I assumed was this huge relief was going to just vanish out and everything that happened to me as a child was just going to disappear. Well, you and I both know that's not what happened.
Right.
It's
Right.
this is still something you have to deal with.
Yeah. And I love that advice that, yeah, justice and healing, very, very separate. And getting the guy out the streets so he can't reoffend, that's a goal. almost unrealistic goal, but at least he gets the label if he's found guilty and registered sex offender or whatever, though so many holes in that system. But
There
don't
is.
confuse that with personal healing. That's excellent advice. I love that.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
what I've learned with that is, you know what? I don't really care what happens to him. I don't care if he wins the case. I don't care if he gets 10 years, 20 years. It doesn't matter to me because I had to do what I had to do.
Right.
So
Right.
so the whole justice, I mean, yes, should he pay for what he did? Yeah. But am I going to get caught up in it? No. Because I'm doing what I have to do to keep on my healing journey.
Right. Exactly. And that's great words of wisdom. Do what you need to do to keep on your healing journey. So, with that, thank you for coming, Kyle, and we'll see you next time on the Healing for Male Survivors podcast. If you would like to learn more about my coaching with Polar Live Consulting, where I provide one-on-one coaching and group coaching, both with a focus on healing for male survivors, reach out to me at polarliveconsulting.com. That is polar spelled Pola.